A quick note. This used to be a segment in my now cancelled Everything I Watched in 2024 video. The video was cancelled due to the fact that it was taking way too long, and by the time I would finish it, it would probably be released at the end of 2025, which wouldn't make sense. So, with that being said, please enjoy the video and excuse any weird editing quirks that are a direct result of the video it used to be a part of. Smiles to you. Also, this video is rated mature. I watched both Arcane Season 1 and Season 2 this year, and I gotta say, I now understand the hype. Season 1 is pretty much amazing, with little to criticize in my opinion. Just amazing characters, with an amazing world, with excellent pacing and story beats, and of course stellar animation. Season 2, on the other hand, kinda drops the ball just a little bit. The animation is still stellar. In fact, every episode of Season 2 pretty much has a music video in it. And that was actually a running joke between me and my brother, who watched each batch of episodes together as they dropped, to point out when the music videos were happening, because they were just happening every single episode, and it was just really funny to us. But when it comes to the pacing of the story, this season doesn't do that too well. Every plot point feels so rushed, and every episode never really gets time to breathe in Season 2. I watched all of Season 1 the night before Season 2 even came out, and Season 1 didn't seem to have any of these weird pacing issues, so that was weird. I think the main problem with Season 2's story is that it feels like it actually needed a Season 3 to finish the story in a natural and unrushed way, which usually I don't like saying. I don't want to extend a show past its runtime, but you know, I feel like this show really needed a Season 3, because a lot of stuff is way too squished together. Like, for example, we don't even see what happened to Jace, Echo, or Heimerdinger after being sucked into the multiverse until the last 3 episodes of the show, which really sucks because I was the most interested in what they were doing. I also feel like we barely focused on Mel at all this season, or at least that's how it felt due to the pacing. When you put it into perspective, how each episode is 40 minutes long, it feels like every episode we aren't focusing on a particular character feels like eternity. Another issue this season has is that the characters they introduced this season don't matter and pretty much just waste screen time. They introduce a child for Jinx to care about, who, when I saw her, I immediately was like, oh, that child is the most dead child I have ever seen in my life. And when the child does die, nobody seems to have that big of a reaction, and the child is pretty much forgotten immediately. They introduce a drunk guy called Loris, who is kind of Vi's friend, but only has 4 lines of dialogue and then gets murdered in the last episode. They introduce a fish guy who has no lines and then tries to have this big sacrificial moment, but that doesn't feel earned in the slightest. They introduce this Scottish girl named Maddie, who is really only there to get with Caitlyn for a bit and then gets sniped by her own bullet. Fun fact, when me and my brother were watching this scene play out, as soon as Maddie killed herself on accident, we've looked at each other and said, cinema. Just, oh my god. Oh, yeah, and don't even get me started on Caitlyn. Dear lord, I hate her, and I think she also in turn made Vi as a character weaker. You see, in the first season, their relationship was more subtle, and they were their own people. Vi was a headstrong fighter who wants to do what's right and fight against people in Piltover who are being unfair to the Underground. Meanwhile, Caitlyn is a cop who wants to figure out who is behind the rise of power happening in Zaun. Sure, Caitlyn is a bit classist, but only to a certain extent, but she never goes so classist it's unbearable. But then in Season 2, that all changes because after Caitlyn's mom dies, she goes full classist and fascist. And sure, it's not an illogical jump to make after you see her mom get blown up by a psychopathic member of Zaun, but it's still kind of a jump nonetheless. Also, Vi joining the cops is kind of ludicrous. Her parents were literally murdered by cops, and what's worse is that Caitlyn doesn't seem to understand that. And the thing is, the show knows this is hypocritical, because Jinx literally calls it out. But after Caitlyn makes horrible lapses in judgment and becomes the worst character on the show, Vi gets kicked out of the cops, and that whole storyline just kind of gets tossed under the rug. Also, I think it's insanely funny how Vi and Caitlyn made a task force out of some random drunk guy they found on the street and seemingly did no background checks on, and 2 meter maids they met that one time. I don't know, I just find that really funny, and it's just, why did they put together that task force out of those people? They barely know any of them. I don't know why Vi and Caitlyn did this. It's just so weird. Why is Loris here? Why is the fish guy here? You don't know them. You don't know what they're doing. They could be criminals. I think Loris actually is kind of a criminal. I don't know. But yeah, overall, Season 2 just felt super rushed for no reason, which sucks because there didn't seem to be anything that was keeping them from slowing down. They took as much time as they needed and spent every cent of that $250 million that they got, which luckily shows absolutely in the final product visually. Like, it's amazing what they've done. Also, and I'm gonna get murdered by a lot of people for this, but I didn't really get the point of the Kate Vi sex scene. I'm so sorry. Like, it's cool for people who really like that ship, and I did like that ship in season 1, not as much as in season 2 because of my feelings of Caitlyn as a character, and Vi because Vi doesn't really have a character all that much, so it just feels weird. But it's just, I don't know, it feels like a fan service thing, and I just don't get why they did it. Like, in that moment, that's not really an appropriate moment to be doing anything. Just let Vi out of the cage and then fight the war. I don't know. But to reiterate, it just kind of felt like fan service for people who love the Kate Vi ship, which I guess is emblematic of the entire season. At least when Mel and Jace had sex in season 1, that was to show how Jace was ignoring Victor, which sends Victor down a darker path, which later leads to him becoming the villain out of nowhere. I don't know. I can't believe I just analyzed the sex scene. Good lord, I feel pretentious. I could probably talk about Arcane Season 2 for hours, but I don't wanna anymore. Heck, maybe I'll make a separate video on it. I don't know. Who knows? Don't hold me to it.